Washington for those annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank. Those kick off officially tomorrow. Live in Washington, we're now joined by SABC correspondent Kevin Mcaleese. Thank you for joining us. Kevin, what will be on the agenda for our finance chief?
Yes, we understand that Minister Gordhan is in Washington, D.C. for these IMF meetings, and that he's expected tomorrow to join other finance ministers from around the world to discuss his country's outlook. The IMF had already tackled that earlier in the week when it had talked about that singled out South Africa for a disappointing growth, talking about how it had been how political uncertainty and weak policy making were among the reasons for that. And so it's the minister's job really to come here and try and present an understanding of the challenges to the South African economy, the challenges to its global growth, and exactly what policies are going to be in place to try and deal with it. But, you know, putting it in context, the global growth picture hasn't been great. We're at 3.1% this year. The projection for 2017 for global growth just inching up slightly to 3.4%. But there are other issues. There's a spectre of that Hawks investigation over the minister, and of course this threat, this cloud of a potential downgrade by the ratings agency facing South Africa. None of these things are helping his cause to promote a strong South African economy going forward.
Yeah, and he's had to over and over again defend the manoeuvrability, I guess, of Treasury in South Africa. The IMF, I remember that view that you're talking about. They downgraded growth for South Africa next year. Just tell us a bit more about how the IMF, about how South Africa is being viewed right now on the global stage.
Yes, I was just down at the IMF earlier this morning when the Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, was talking about the challenges facing the continent and facing South Africa. Low commodity prices, policy uncertainty and weak investor confidence. Those were the top three being discussed. That saw the IMF lower its expectations for 2017 for South Africa to 0.8. Back in July, of course, we'd heard the projection of 1%. As I said, global growth has been sluggish and subdued across the board, but South Africa in particular was singled out on the continent for having its problems. The IMF Managing Director believes South Africa needs to adjust its fiscal policies to reinvigorate growth. And there's been a lot of talk at the IMF about these targeted fiscal policies and emerging economies, established economies, each having their own unique set of challenges to overcome, and that there's no one size fits all. So that's why these meetings at the IMF and World Bank are so important for these people to come together, these experts and these finance ministers to come together and really try and thrash out solutions and ideas towards improving the global economy and their own domestic situations.
And I guess what our delegation wants to do is make South Africa stand out as something unique. We've been following Pravin Gordhan in London, in New York. Just in finality, summarize what the message of this delegation is.
Well, yes, this was a substantial delegation headed by Minister Gordhan. Of course, they went to New York for that investor conference to sort of send this message of South Africa Inc. is open for business. There are plenty of opportunities. But he's also been quite realistic, and he said 2016 has not been a good year for the continent. It's not been a good year for South Africa. Growth has been subdued. But he also said that in the sort of medium to long term, he sees hope, he sees green shoots. He believes that over the coming year, there will be improvement. The finance chief pushing this message of hard work, tough decisions, making structural reforms over the next years could actually see the emergence of a new South Africa. This is an opportunity he's taking in the United States to try and grow and swell that confidence in US investors. But as we said, he's got some big issues hanging over him, that rating agency spectre, and of course that investigation, which won't be going down well with investors or potential investors in the international community.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin Mcaleese, for us from Washington, D.C.